r/AskReddit. What do you swear you saw, but don't have any proof of? I saw a fox chasing a turkey on a hot summer day. They both tired out and stopped running at the same time and laid down to rest. Then they got up to continue the chase after about a minute. Some absolute cartoon nonsense that I swear happened, but I wouldn't believe me either. Sitting at the campsite and a beaver walks out of the lake, like on its hind legs, and proceeds to walk like this through the campsite and into the woods, like it's on its way to Pooh's house or whatever, just strolling. My best friend died almost a decade ago now, duck. I miss her. Without knowing it, I cooked her last dinner and said my last goodbye. I went home to get some sleep. At 2:01 AM, I felt something wake me up. I opened my eyes, and for just a few seconds, I saw a grey, not black, blob like one-dimensional shadow moving across the ceiling. The shadow wouldn't make any sense with the angles of the windows and the street lights. I lived in that house for many years, and never saw a shadow move like that. I had two perpendicular beams on my ceiling intersecting at the center of my ceiling. The shadow crossed over the two beams without hugging the vertical faces of the wood. It was as if the shadow was floating through the air like smoke. It wasn't smoke, as there was no smell, no candles in my room either. And then it was gone. Trying to figure out what I saw, it took me a while to fall back to sleep. The next morning, I got the call that my best friend died at 1:35 AM. 26 minutes before something woke me up. To this day, I'm convinced I saw her soul floating above me, somehow saying goodbye. I have no idea if I'm correct, but that's how I feel. I'm not a religious person. I believe in science, but I can't ignore that night's experience. I know science will figure it out one day. I miss you. I think about you every day. Was living in Japan in a city called Miyazaki. Was watching TV around the Christmas season. Station was MRT's. Was about 10 PM at night. There was a station ID break, and it ended with a full screen large type message in English. Merry Christmas, duck you. This was 1993. A lion at my parents' house when I was a kid. My older brother saw it too. Coincidentally, a lion went missing from a zoo in Ohio around that time and was never found. My brother and I swore we saw it, but obviously had no proof. That winter, my parents found giant paw prints outside that definitely were not a dog, cat, coyote, etc. Years later, when I was a freshman in high school, my friend's mom was driving me home and swore she saw a lion run across the road my parents live on. She never even knew the story about me swearing there was a lion out there. She was so convinced that she immediately called the police. That was all the proof I needed to know I was never crazy and know what I saw as a kid. I swear I saw a man walk backwards up a hill and disappear. He went out of my line of sight as he walked behind a tree and never came out the other side. I checked the tree and everything. It scared the crap out of me. Driving on a semi-rural road south of Salem, Oregon about 15 years ago, I swear I saw some cryptid looking bipedal wolf thing. My GF at the time was with me, and we both saw it. Didn't really talk about it, just kinda accepted we saw something we couldn't explain. I worked in Medford back in 2008 to 2010. I was doing a little weekend trip with a girlfriend at the time. We were on the 20 between Corvallis and Newport. We both saw a bipedal wolf thing also. He must have been a good 6 feet tall. We saw him running across the highway at dusk. When we passed the spot he crossed, we looked up into the trees and saw something glaring from the trees. We drove our asses off the rest of the evening, lol. I was doing laundry, and after opening the door to take the clothes from the washer, a live grasshopper flew out and hit me in the chest. It scared the shit out of me because it was so unexpected. A grasshopper somehow got into my laundry, survived the entire wash cycle, and had enough life in him to jump out and hit me. I threw him back outside. I joke and say he's immortal. He's probably still out there somewhere. Thunder now. In college we had team workouts at 5:30 AM during the winter. When we emerged from our dorms we were greeted by an absolutely insane lightning display combined with driving snow. The walk across campus was absolutely insane, like something from the day after tomorrow. When we finished the workout around 7, it had warmed up and had changed to rain and everything had melted. There were 25 guys on the roster and we all know what we saw, but none of our friends believed us. A possessed house, or whatever. Worked for the local utilities reading water meters while in school. Old ass house. Was used as a makeshift hospital during the Civil War. Meter was all the way in the back, and they had apparently redid the basement so there was new concrete walls, but the original stone foundation was still there. Sort of like a maze. Went in and read the meter, took a wrong turn and got lost. Kind of panicked, and got lost again. It was only a handful of walls, because they wanted a game room and bar. Calmed down, found the meter again, followed the walls, and after a couple minutes, found the exit outside. Dude I was with asked what the hell happened, and told him I got lost, but not a big deal. He asked how I got lost. Told him, the new walls. He asked what walls. Looked back inside and there wasn't any walls. Just a dark big ass basement. Apparently I was in there for like an hour. He came in, after catching up to get his lighter, never saw me, walked back out, and kept on reading meters for an hour, before he saw me coming back out. He assumed I walked out upstairs, and was talking to the guy who owned it and he'd catch me at the end of the street. I know I saw walls. I know I got lost, and it sure as duck wasn't no hour. Me and a buddy were laying on some playground equipment after a night of drinking, when both of us at the same time go, "What's that?" There was a light up in the sky about twice as bright as the stars around it, staying still in the sky, that we hadn't noticed before. Suddenly it picks up speed, goes from directly overhead to over the horizon in about 5 seconds. An absolutely colossal earthworm. It must have been 4 inches in diameter. I was just a kid, and was coming out of my front lawn. I panicked and stomped the ground to scare it away, and it worked, and every day I have regretted it since, because I have absolutely no proof of this giant ducking monster living in my front yard. I swear I felt/saw a serial killer or something at a Chinese restaurant my family and I were eating at. My dad and I were at the end of the table just focusing on talking to grandparents and eating. Some guy we were completely unaware of that whole time stood to leave behind us, and every hair on the back of my neck raised up. I've never felt anything like it before. Something was just incredibly wrong about him, and I didn't even have to see him to feel it. My dad and I shared a look, and talked about it later. He said he felt the exact same thing, but said the guy looked completely normal. It's never happened with anyone else. IDK what that was. It's been like 12 years. I just called him to ask if he remembers, and he definitely does lol. A UFO. I was so close to the ducking thing. Had it had windows, I could have seen inside. It did tricks for me. And the most frustrating thing about it is I can't even be upset with people for not believing me, because that's the rational response. I'm just stuck with this insane knowledge I can't do anything with. What did it look like? This is where the story gets really ridiculous, because to be honest, it looked like a cheap piece of flying saucer from a 90s B-move. It was saucer shaped, it had a flat top with light up blue panels going around it, and the only truly remarkable physical feature was that it was made of really shiny silver metal. Like shinier than any I've ever seen. It's what it could do that was remarkable. You know the game Pong on Atari? It could move side to side, diagonally, any direction it wanted, like it was a pong ball bouncing from one side of the screen to the next. It was really uncanny, because it didn't have to like stop or slow down. It was just bouncing. And it can move so fast it looks like it's teleporting. And it left a trail of green and pink light frozen in the air behind it when it flew away. A shadow person. I saw someone in my kitchen late at night, who I thought was my father standing by the stove. It was dark, and I jumped when I saw his silhouette in the dark. I asked him what he was doing standing in the kitchen in the middle of the night. He just stood in the dark not moving. I told him it wasn't funny, it's ducking creepy. I flipped the light switch on. I was alone. Nobody there but me shaking from terror. I couldn't see him clearly, but I saw someone with his shape in the dark. I talked to it. Nobody will ever believe I saw that. I know what happened that night. I talked to it for about 30 seconds. It stood 6 feet from me. P.S. Maybe I'm ducking crazy. When I think about it, it's easier to convince me I hallucinated, had some sort of psychotic episode, or was seeing things instead of what really happened. that I talked to my dead mother on the phone 3 weeks after she died. My mom passed away January 2021. I flew from Florida to Kansas City for the funeral with my husband and daughter. We attended the services, closed out our estate, returned home. About 3 weeks later, I'm lying in my bed and my phone rings. I was awake when the phone rang. I had been lying there debating getting out of bed or just lying there feeling sorry for myself, but I was wide awake. I sat up in my bed to look at my phone. I don't remember what the caller ID showed, but I answered. My mom had a very distinctive way of answering the phone when she was calling someone. "Well, hi there. Chuckle, did I wake you up?" That was exactly what she said. I just sat there holding the phone for a minute and then said "Mom," and then there was a click of a phone turning off and the universe resetting itself. My mom was dead. I attended her funeral. I saw her in the casket. My mom also called me at some point after she died. Her phone was not in the possession of my brother, my aunt, or mom's boyfriend, the 3 people who were closest to her and would have received the phone. None of them would have played a joke like that. I'm not even sure where her phone went after she passed. I made some friends while working retail that enjoyed exploring abandoned buildings, and I went with them once. Massive industrial complex that was left to rot in the 80s after the work dried up in that sector. I got separated from the group in an upper part of the building and could barely see a thing. They insisted we go at night. I tried a few light switches and one actually turned on a light that had a red shaded bulb, which I found strange. Even stranger, there were several men standing in the room with me that I couldn't see until the light came on. At least 3, maybe more, standing adjacent to each other with strange clothes. One of them had a rifle in his hands, not a hunting rifle, a mil-spec type, and another was staring into my soul with his huge blue eyes. He said nothing, but placed his finger over his lips, as if to shush me. After a second he waved his hand to shoo me away. I quite literally fell down the stairs trying to get away, and found my friends a few hallways away. I told them we weren't alone, and that we had to leave. They saw the fear in my eyes and believed me. On the drive home I told them what I saw, albeit I was a stammering mess, and they were flabbergasted. I told no one, and dropped all those friends. Some nights I wonder about their identities and objective in that building. Okay, I get how cliche and fake this sounds, but just bear with me. My parents bought a very large but old and decrepit New England home. I was running around it relatively alone back when I was barely elementary school aged. I was running up the stairs. At the top it takes a 90 degrees turn onto the floor. I remember getting to the 4th step from the top, grabbing the top railing and swinging around to the floor only to see something. It looked like a white human leg made out of wood, but where the knee should be was a deep socketed face. The entire thing looked like it was melting, kind of like E.T. covered in mud. I just remember freezing and looking up to lock eyes with it. Then it started moaning in a way that sounded like warped wood moaning in pleasure from the pain. Obviously I booked it out of there and hid in the family car. Now, I'm not saying I saw something supernatural. I've always had a very overactive imagination. I routinely saw stuff as a kid, like faces in collection of leaves on branches. That being said, I remember seeing something so clear that was just there 1 second, then gone the next. I swear I could hear it moaning and screaming, even as I write this. Faceless people. Once standing under the light outside my grandparents' garage. When I asked my grandfather to look, nobody was there, and he said he never saw anyone. The second time, I was being kept out of my grandparents' living room, and when I accidentally walked in, one was lying on the sofa bed. When later asked about being kept out of the room, my grandmother denied it ever happened. Still a vivid set of memories from my childhood. No explanation. Ghosts on the Gettysburg battlefield. For the longest time I chalked it up to reenactors and a wild imagination, until several years later, I was back at the park and visiting a bookstore. I overheard another customer telling the clerk the exact same story I had witnessed, down to some pretty specific details. I worked at Gettysburg one summer. Everybody there had a ghost story. Most common one I heard was that white tents would be visible on the battlefield. People would assume it was for a reenactment, but reenactors are strictly prohibited from pitching their tents on the grounds of the park, and they all know this. Another common one was that lots of little flickering flames, like torches, would be visible at night along the tree line from which Pickett's charge was launched. When I was 13, 2008, my grandfather hung himself. He was a stoic old man who lived in rural Ireland. My family lived in the suburbs outside of Boston, Massachusetts. My mother was in pieces. She went to Ireland for the funeral, and when she came home she cried herself to sleep every night. One night I'm up late getting myself a snack from the kitchen. I took my snack to go back to my bedroom and I saw him. My grandfather, just like I remembered, was slowly ambling up the stairs. I just stood there in silent disbelief. I've seen what people would consider ghosts, but the human mind is a weird thing and I won't act like I'm any less prone to hallucinations than anyone else. But the next morning I sat down with my mom to have breakfast. She was quiet that morning and then said, "You know, I've been crying myself to sleep since I came back from Ireland. Last night I was crying and I felt the sheets get tucked in behind me just like my daddy used to do when I was a little girl. I reached behind me, but I couldn't feel anything. Your father wasn't home yet, so it wasn't him." Then I fell into the most peaceful sleep I've had in ages. Her bedroom was at the very top of the stairs. I wasn't sure if I should tell her that I had seen her father the night before. I didn't know how it might impact her. I kept it to myself until years later, when she retold that story. When she heard my side, she wasn't even surprised. She just said, "I believe you. You wouldn't believe the things I've seen." Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.